Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined once again by Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp and the good old Nicolò Grasso as we review Alien Romulus. Fede Álvarez's jump into the Alien franchise and the newest entry into the Alien series, Alien Romulus follows a new group of characters as they go into a spaceship. They're trying to salvage some parts, make a little bit of a profit, but of course their plan is complicated because there happens to be an alien on board and you get a new fight for survival. Today is a very interesting episode, starting first as spoiler free and then eventually moving into spoiler territory. We have some pretty heavy debate about the film as we go on quite a ride of first really appreciating what it has to offer as a roller coaster experience, and then possibly getting a bit more negative as we really dissect its place within the franchise it belongs to. This is a good episode. I'm happy you're here with us. Now let's get to our review of Alien Romulus. And to start our conversation on Alien Romulus, Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you first as the Italian. What are your thoughts on Alien Romulus?
I was very excited going into Alien Romulus for like a multitude of reasons. I don't consider myself a fan per se of the Alien franchise in the sense that I just think about it constantly. But going through the movies, I was like, you know what? I actually really like this series of films. And especially with Prometheus and Alien Covenant, you know, Ridley Scott was going into some very interesting directions with the franchise, with the story, pushing everything forward. I was like, okay, what's he gonna cook next? Nothing. They stopped him. The financial, almost bomb, we could say, of Alien Covenant, but especially the critical and commercial reception, like, was very poor. So they canceled that. Disney buyout of Fox. Now here we are. Fede Álvarez directing. I really love the Evil Dead remake that he made. His first feature debut, I believe, as well. Definitely American one, at least. It was my first ever R-rated movie in the cinema, which was very exciting. First ever horror film on the big screen. So it has a good spot in my heart. And I also really like Don't Breathe. So I was looking forward to it in Romulus. I was like, this could be good. I like the cast. I like the idea behind it. I didn't see any trailers or anything. One thing that I really like about this podcast is that I get to articulate my thoughts, and think it over. And sometimes, usually, I watch the movie 1 or 2 days prior to recording. This time around, I managed to watch this on opening day, which was on a Wednesday. For listeners, it's been like 5 days since I've seen it in Romulus, one of the first ones to watch it. And I've had a lot of time to think about it. And gut reaction, I was like, this is pretty great, flawed, but pretty great. The more I think about it, the less I like it, which kind of sucks. I don't like to feel like that, but there are just some things that I cannot look past. What do I like about this film? I think the tension is excellent. Fede Álvarez creates some very interesting set pieces. The sets themselves look great. There's a lot of care into recreating practical locations, into using practical effects. The CGI, whenever used, it's pretty spotless, to be honest, except for one egregious instance that we'll get into in a second. And the atmosphere of it, the immersion, felt like Alien. Kaylee Spaney and David Johnson, amazing. They make this film work. Their chemistry, their story, their passion, the friendship slash sibling brotherhood that they have is very touching, in my opinion. And the film just sounds great. Like watching this on the big screen, the booming noises, the alien xenomorph gnarling in the background, the screams, like it felt so great. But the more I think about it, and originally I thought it was a positive thing about the film, was like, oh, it's almost like a greatest hits of the previous Alien movies. And then I was like, okay, what's it doing with that? Nothing. They're just presenting them one after the other. It's like, oh, this is like that scene from Alien. This is like Alien Resurrection. Oh, look, this looks like the thing from Prometheus. Oh, this is like the slasher moment in Covenant. It's like, okay, we've seen this before. What are you doing with it? Nothing. They're just presenting it in a way that's very nice, very polished, very shiny, but they don't really do anything particularly interesting. Narratively, I think the side characters that are not Kaylee Spain and David Johnson are just cannon fodder, cliched to the max. I think the actors do a fine job, but they just look way too young. And I get that the idea is that we're supposed to have a new cast of characters, fresh blood, those are young, they have hope for the future, for something better. Fair. But if they're supposed to have worked like 12,000 hours doing like mining jobs or whatever, they look like models. They're like all beautiful, all pretty, all super clean, not a speck of dirt. It just feels weird, but I can look past that. Um, but they don't really do anything with this concept to just explore, I don't know, capitalism, corporations abusing people. The first Alien did it way better. Are we going further into the exploration of what it means to be human, of what it means to have faith into something that's bigger than you, that hates you, like Covenant or Prometheus? No, that's just too much, for this film. It's content in being mostly just a slasher in space that turns into complete schlock at the end, which I appreciated. It was insane, but still, it felt like it was a bit of a missed opportunity. And to bring back a cast member from the original film with CGI in a role that's completely. We don't need him. I don't know if we're going spoilers for this one, right? Can I just say it, or do we save it for later on?
Let's save it for later.
Let's save it for later, but just inexcusable. Like, I've had people try to defend it. Like, no, but it makes sense with the narrative. It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't make sense for the narrative. And narratives are written by human beings. Human beings can change a script. They can find new ways or alternative ways to tackle some things or bring back some characters. We really didn't need that. Not only is it god awful narratively, but also it's just distracting. It's completely distracting. Overall, I enjoyed the film a lot on the big screen. I had some reservations, but the more I think about it, the less I like it. It hasn't given me anything to ponder on. It hasn't really given me anything other than an adrenaline rush, which is a shame. But also, to be honest, if I have to be a bit more objective, kind of on point with Fede Álvarez as a whole.
Jack, you've made some great faces during that speech, so I'd love if you would go next.
No, how miserable, honestly. I've not been a stan of Ridley Scott of just the last 5 years. I've been there since day one. As a Brit, I feel like it's part of my DNA to root for the Englishman, especially a Geordie, a Northerner. Similar to what Nick said about Evil Dead, my second I-rated film at the cinema was Prometheus, and before that was Scream 4 the year before. I remember going watching it at the Bradford Cineworld, and it was interesting because I've like you, I've been a fan of the Alien franchise, but since I've been alive, I've only ever seen, before 2012, I only ever saw essentially two versions of that on the cinema screen. One which was fine, and the one is god awful in the Alien vs Predator series. I wasn't old enough to see Resurrection, and Prometheus. I think you can probably debate whether a xenomorph is even in that film, although I think it's the Nemomorph. That's the title of it. So I was 2017 for when Covenant came out. I only got to watch it at the cinema opening night. And I have a real affection for Ridley Scott's cinema, and the fact that Alien throughout the years has really warmed on me. And I think it's interesting that you said you went to go watch this on Wednesday. I went to watch this yesterday morning, and I've had usually I do it like 20 minutes before we record this. I've done it for like the last few weeks. It's bad. It's really bad, because sometimes you come on air and you think, is he okay? Because he's like spiraling. But it's the thing of the podcast, gang. It's been here since 2020. Tenet. That's all I'll say. Go listen to that. Listen to a man slowly just break down during COVID. But in preparation of this, because as soon as Carson put this on the schedule, I was like, I cannot wait for this. It's been one of those things, I'm not going to lie. I've really wanted to watch this, and I've purposely not got hyped for it. I've really put this to the backside of myself, and it was only until we did Trap where Carson was like, oh, next week we do an Alien. I was like, oh my God, it's here. I've always tried to keep really cool with it, because the issues with Covenant, and we'll talk about that a bit later, because I think it's very apparent where Disney and Fox, Disney and 20th Century go next. I've watched all the Alien movies, different cuts of it, special features. I'm now on the 40th anniversary shorts of them, knee deep. I've got a problem. We'll get to that later. But I've really soaked up everything. And going into this, it was so apparent in the first 25, 40 minutes. I was like, he's doing the best of hits here. He's doing the best of here. Like we've started with Alien 3, we've gone to Alien, we're at Aliens, and then undoubtedly, like you mentioned, we get to Resurrection. There are other dips into other films in the franchise. Obviously, you'll guess which ones they are, but I'll leave that for a little bit later because I think they're quite important little pieces. But I didn't know what to expect because with Fede Álvarez, I've liked Don't Breathe. I haven't seen Evil Dead since 2013, which would be the 10 years. I wasn't very best pleased with the Spider's Web, which I thought was a director trying to make a commercial work out of material that can't work commercially because of the thematic. And with what happened with Scott and an Alien, and we get this, I was a little bit more apprehensive. I really enjoyed this. I really, really enjoyed this. This was like, to me, someone directing with a smile on their face. And we did it last week, the Shyamalan on Trap. I'm watching an enthusiastic director being like, we should do this, we should do that, we should make this interact with another previous entry. We should get this. This will be fun if we do this. Does it go overboard? Oh dear me, does it go overboard with its homages, with its odes, with its interaction within its own lore, to a point where I'm currently writing the review for Clapper, so it's very difficult to formulate an opinion as such. Aside from having to get it on paper, it's been a roller coaster because the more I think about it, the more I can understand other pieces of critics where they've levelled a slight animosity to it. But for me as a fan, I think this is what the franchise needs in a way of keeping people back. I mean, this is $80 million. Would it shock you that Covenant is $17 million more than this? I mean, this is $80 million. And then you look at Covenant, you look at two very different type of thematics. I don't know what that says about one or the other. I'll let you two, the viewers, listeners think of that. Because that to me is like, I don't know if that's good or bad. But walking out of it, I was really pleasantly surprised of how fun this was. It's gripping, it's dark, it's claustrophobic. Everything's here. It takes everything from the lore, comic books, the video game, Alien Isolation, which Nick and me have been talking about privately as well. There's a director here who was brought in the mythology. It has the blessing of Scott. It fits into canon. This is not an Alien versus Predator thing. But I really enjoyed this. But yes, it's repetitive, it's derivative, and there are very little big swings here, I found, to be within the canon. And overall, coming back from it, the way I want to watch it, I'm definitely want to go watch it in IMAX. So the next screening, I want to watch it in IMAX. So I know Chris Stanton, who's a writer for Clapper, we're talking about 4DX, as it was amazing. I don't think I'll be able to attend something like that because I don't know anything where I live, but IMAX, I love it. But I'm telling you now, when the logo came up at the beginning and the end, I was just so happy that we've got to live to see, not got to live, not that I'm dying or anything, but it was just so fun to watch another Alien movie on the big screen. And I told you to this before. This was going to go to Hulu. I think this was saved by Scott, who saw a rough cut of it and was like, "We need it on the big screen." And that's kind of like a criminal where it happened to Prey. Prey feels like it belongs at Hulu because there's some CGI stuff there. But this is the big screen adaptation of Alien. It should be. I don't think it should be relegated to the streaming. And Noah Hawley's Alien Earth we'll get into later. But yeah, I'll move on to Carson. I really enjoyed this as a fan of the series, and also just something to just sit down and have fun with and be scared shitless.
I'm probably going to be in the middle of both of you guys. I think as a roller coaster ride, just like in a complete vacuum, this film is incredibly fun. Álvarez is directing the hell out of this film. I'd probably say this is his best showcase as director. Even I will say Evolution as a writer, and like the twists and turns of Don't Breathe is very fun, but I hated the Evil Dead film. It's so nice seeing him take a franchise and doing a best of hits that actually has like engaging characters, really good chemistry between actors. David Johnson is incredible in this film. I think he has genuinely one of my favorite genre performances of the year. That is creating a very entertaining film. And if you're a fan of this franchise and you just want to see those generic hits and you want to see the quotes and you want to see the references, this is a very good theatrical time. I'm going to be more harsh though when it comes to what is this film doing as far as adding something new to the franchise, because while it's fun, this film is very similar, Nick, and you mentioned I think just specifically because of one element to it, but it feels in some ways like Rogue One to me, where like it's fun, it's what it is, but this is not providing anything we haven't seen before. It's not testing the waters. And for a director that is so capable and such a competently made film that is really exciting and really engaging on a visual level with effects, the effects in this film are really strong. why can't they be giving something more? I think back to Prey on Hulu, and Prey offered this brand new take, this new iconography, this new, not necessarily the emotional beats are that crazy in the realm of cinema, but ultimately that is a film that is pushing this franchise forward into something really interesting. This just felt so limited in scope to me, especially seeing what Scott set up and the fact that they chose this. And I get why, like for financial reasons. And again, it is a very fun film. But are we really going to celebrate like this film overlay at the cinema? Just like, I mean, what is the difference between this and like, the Marvel films that are like, here's a reference to Avengers? I don't know. For me, like, it's a fun film. I'm definitely positive on this film. I gave it 3.5 stars, but like, I don't know. For me, I just was so disappointed that it feels like all the pieces were here to do something really unique, really engaging, really fresh, really new. And we just settled down into kind of, for me, going through the motions largely, even if that ride and even if the characters and the effects and the scares and the iconography, that's all strong. I just wish it was doing something more engaging and fresh. That's my take on it. Hey friends, hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. I wanted to pop in quickly to remind you that if you want even more ClapperCast, you can get it every single month at patreon.com/ClapperCastPod. For literally just a couple bucks a month, not only can you support us in our podcast and doing what we love, which is talking about film, but you can also gain access to exclusive bonus episodes every single month, which includes the entire back catalog, which is now over a year old, every single month adding a new episode to it. We're talking reviews for films like Lady Bird. We're talking reviews for films like District 9. If you enjoyed our John Couture series last year, me and Nick did a bonus episode on it. If you miss Alina on the podcast, we have our Iron Claw deep dive. We did a Road to WrestleMania series. If you've been enjoying our summer blockbuster series, we have exclusive episodes, including one on Lord of the Rings and one on Jurassic Park. Point is, there are tons of fun bonus episodes available, again, just for a couple bucks a month at patreon.com/ClapperCastPod. Now let's get back to the episode.
What genuinely, like, I'm not going to argue with that. And the Rogue One thing, I don't want to get into spoilers and all that, and I won't do, because I appreciate the format and I respect the host, unlike some other people who want to just jump and drop hints. This was ruined for me maybe a day before the screening, and it was only an inclination of what this Rogue One thing was. And you can probably break that down to two parts. There's a literal sense of that here. There's also the more canon zeitgeist thing where we have to mention everything. What generally shocked me with this, and it's something I've had to wrestle with, I think a lot of people watching this have, is that the fact that this is written and directed by Fede Álvarez, which to me was a surprise when I saw the screen, the credits, the opening credits, especially the ending ones. I was like, oh my god, they've actually handed that to him. That's a shock. That's a pitch? Is it possibly? Because they would have gone to him and asked him to make this film. This is him pitching it. So I can only think that this is an idea that's been spun off. Which asks the question of, well, if this is him pitching it, it can't be a 20th century Disney thing. It must be he wants to honour the work, which I find, I don't know where I come down on that, because to me it's like, you get that you're a fan, and I get that you want to honour Scott, because all this does is honours Ridley Scott. It really does, not just the franchise, but more so that Ridley Scott. But I was shocked about that. But the answer I have for you there, and I'm doing a lot of like research into this, and ultimately watching this fall apart from 1997 ultimately to 2012, is that Fox gave this the spin-off to Alien vs Predator, and I think Cameron and Scott had met up after, I think in the 2001, 2 and 3, and that there was a conversation about making a fifth one here, going back to its roots, and Fox said no, and I think James Cameron or Ridley Scott said, if you do this, you will kill this franchise. And they did it anyway. And I think since then, they've purposely tried to make sure that this does not fall into the hands of, let's say, a franchise that just throws onto someone else, and there's not a formulation of canon. And I think they're very, very wary now of who they pick. So I have to think that, yes, Fede has put a lot of emphasis on the swings and roundabouts, rhymes and rhythms of this lore, but I also think it's very much someone telling him, this, if you want to make this, we want it to be canon. It can't go against the prequels, and it can't go against what's before. So I think he's written this with that idea. I think it, for me, just about escapes. But if you're someone and I think we agree on this about Covenant and Prometheus, it's very much like feels like we're not progressing, we're stagnating, we've not gone back at all. I don't think that but this is not an X-Men Origins or anything like that. This is not Jesus Christ, what have we done? This is very much like, okay, we'll just make the Wolverine. All right, so we're possibly leading to something else, but we all know what came before it. Yeah, but we don't take risks, we don't take canon risks, and we somehow feel tied down to creative inspiration. I found on often cases, narratively through not through composition. That all feels Fede, but everything else feels like, do we have to do that? And there's a lot of stuff here where I'm like, oh, okay, I found fun, but I can understand by your point where it's like, well, what was the point? And I think this will serve. And this is my hope for this, and I'll pass it to Nick after this. But this is my hope, and I tweeted this. My hope that this proves to 20th Century and Disney is that this will make a lot of money. It's going to make the 50 mil opening. It's only $80 million, so it only needs 2 weekends, and we're back in business and domestic rights and whatever, and it goes to Disney Plus anyway, so we're not going to have an issue. But it'll prove to them that, yes, the franchise can make money, but they don't want a repetition of everything else. And my only hope is this Green Lights Covenant or Part 2 Alien Awakening. Where that fits in with Scott, I don't know. But getting back to the point, I do think a lot of people, and I've read loads of reviews because I've been fascinated with the discourse here. It feels like we've gone back to 2016 again. It feels like we're talking about moral CGI. We're talking about original IP. We're talking about what audiences are wanting, and I'm reading reviews of audiences saying, "Oh, I loved it. Like it was like everything I wanted." But you've got aliens. I don't know. To me, it feels like you're either a casual fan of this, and there's nothing wrong with that, an audience, and they'll find this and go, "Oh, this is cool," and then there's people who'll watch this again and be like, "Oh, this is amazing." My only thing about this, again, to answer my own point, is the reason why there's certain homages here and literal instances is because they want people to watch Alien and Aliens and the other two again. I think they want to keep them in the zeitgeist. And I also think it's the 40th anniversary. It feels a little bit on the nose to do that, but that's okay. Okay if that's what they want to do. But I also think that they're going to gear up for getting that awakening done. That's what I feel. I think like it is. But I thought to Nick, but to answer your question, I agree with the Rogue One thing. It's hard not to see the comparisons on a literal level as well.
I was like listening to both of you talk about this. It actually started to remind me of another movie that came out this year, which is The First Omen, which is
Okay.
also 20th Century Studio, which is also kind of a prequel, part of a franchise, you know. And both movies, I know First Omen in like a lesser extent, but this one, I don't know how big, but they were like weeks of reshoots. Both of these films had them. And I wouldn't be surprised if the instances of overt fan service, maybe even that one like extended glorified cameo, we could say, were added in reshoots. Were added to be more like you were saying, just kind of like reminding you more of the IP and getting people to check out the others and whatnot. Which is always like I'm always conflicted about it because more often than not, it has been proven that people don't want something new. All of the aliens that tried to do something new were not well received by the public. We might like them, but generally, you know, for good reasons, sometimes for bad reasons, other times, but they were not uh, accepted by viewers. And this one definitely plays it very safe, like very, very safe, in a way that feels a bit cynical. I do kind of wish, comparing like this to Prey, I do kind of wish Prey also got a theatrical release because I think it actually does something more interesting with the franchise, with the IP, we could say, to just explore something new. And in this film, I was hoping for that. I think the hook here is pretty strong. You know, like we're actually starting from once on a real planet with real people just working and living their miserable lives as workers, which is okay. Like we're setting the world, we're setting the characters. It's interesting, it's engaging. Okay, they want to leave, relatable. They go on the ship, they go into space, and then they don't really do anything with these humans, which was disappointing. the pilot captain of the ship, she has almost no personality. The girl played by what's the Dora the Explorer, okay, what's Isabella
Mhm.
Merced. I think she's very good in here, very committed, but also again, like, she does very little. Like, she's barely present in this film. It feels one guy is just caricature racist. Um, I don't know. It all felt cliched in a way that just left me wanting more because the setup was so engaging. I don't know if it makes sense. Like, it started off where I was like, oh, I'm actually caring about these characters. But then when we actually get to their demise, it didn't have the punch that I was expecting. And that's another thing that surprised me, is that the movie is a bit mean spirited, but also it pulls back a lot of punches when it comes to the violence, especially when compared to both Prometheus and Alien Covenant, which were, in my opinion, like hard R movies. In this one, a lot of the gore, a lot of the blood, it always feels a bit more like, we're shying away from it. It's close-ups now. We're just shaking the camera. It's don't focus on that. It's disturbing, which is odd coming from the guy who directed Evil Dead. I do think this was probably originally supposed to be meaner, more graphic, and then they got test audience reactions. They realized people wanted more familiarity to it all, which is why they added maybe a new character, which is why they added probably one of the worst callback line deliveries I've heard in one of these
Oh
movies,
my
where
god.
it's embarrassing. Like the
Yep.
rhythm of it, just you can almost feel David Johnson just like squirming inside. Like, do I have to say this? Do I have to? I don't know. Like, it's so. And but again, the actual moment to moment experience of watching it, I was in it, man. Like, I was enjoying it a lot. It's like you said, Carson. It is a roller coaster ride, which is not a bad thing per se. Like, that's ultimately kind of like where I want to split my opinion with this film. I can rationalize it. I can find all the negatives that I'm talking about, problems that I have with just the use of the franchise and how it's not. Just they're not doing anything interesting with it. They're not doing anything interesting with it. But also, I cannot deny that I had a blast watching it. It was so fun, man. You get into some of those sequences, into the tension, how it escalates, and Katie Spain is just running around, and there's a lot of zero gravity sequences that are very inventive. I think that's probably one of the only genuinely new things added to this film, in my opinion. In terms of just visuals, we haven't really experienced in that way before. But yeah, like, I don't know, it felt very disposable. For something that's this well crafted technically, for it to feel this like throwaway, mesh.
I find your comment about the characters quite interesting because honestly, like, as I said, I've watched as much as I can do before this. Ridley Scott actually mentions this in a documentary about the first Alien. And said the first reviews said that the characters were one dimensional and we don't know who they are. But I think his point. I'm not going to probably paraphrase here because it didn't really matter. It's about what they brought to the tone and what they did in isolation on that ship spoke for themselves. I agree that that is far superior than this, but everything I found with those characters reinforced the tone and thematic that they were getting across. I didn't need to know that there's a certain character here who is, I might probably be too much saying that, but there's certain characters who have certain attributes that come back into the third act. And granted, that narrative feels conventional because we all know where that's going to lead up. And I think that's one of your pulled punches, undoubtedly, there, although there's definitely gone in Prometheus to a point, and that's a master at his craft there. This one, I agree, feels, oh, I thought we were going to see more of that. But to your point, I had no issue with the characters being slightly one dimensional because I do think they reinforce the issue that they have on where they need to escape. You've got systemic issues of prejudice. You've got issues of moral compass about AI already on the land before we get there, how humans and AI interact, the levels of morality what AI will give and what it will take. And then we get on board this place and that whole thing unravels to a deeper level. It's all there. I think that might just be an opinion of yourself. I do think it's there, as light as it is, and I think you get enough substance there to reiterate how bad that world is. And granted, all it needs to show is we need to get out of here. Why? We get told it, And when we get up there and we think we've got some leeway, we've got some freedom, that's when the true horror comes. So I quite like that sentiment, but it's not so differing from again from an Alien 3 thing with the Fincher and the screenplay there about being in a place of where humans are equally as suffocating and invasive and destructive as this creature, and where does the humanity come from then? Which is interesting considering where the alien is birthed from, which I found very interesting. It comes from within. Granted, like the hatred itself. So there's a lot of rhymes and reason here, but I won't disagree. I think they are slightly one. The Brummie accents were quite strong. Two characters here have like Birmingham slight accents, which I thought was slightly strange. And we have two American accents, and then we have Kaylee, the third one, and then David Johnson, which has a nice little twist to it as well. So there's a lot here to sort of divulge in, but I don't know, Carson, if you thought they were one up, but they didn't feel any different to me than Resurrections or Aliens, or I didn't feel any different to Alien in a sense of just the surface level. The other one's deeper, but this at least, I think it filled my issue of what we're escaping from, where we are, and how terrible it is.
I will just say before you go, Carson, personality goes a long way.
Yeah, well.
And all of those cast members have personality.
I think there's personality in these cast characters. I mean, there's two kind of factors that make it kind of complex for me to comment on this. The first is that the sound design and the sound mix made some of the dialogue really difficult to understand. So I would love to go back, especially in like some of the the dialogue scenes. I would love to go back when I can actually fully hear and understand everything that's being said. The second I will say is like, I'm coming in from this as someone who hates and thinks the character work in Evil Dead is awful. So like the fact that there's any personality here, I was like, oh my God, Álvarez, you're doing it. Yes, Álvarez. Like I was fully expecting just nothing. So like for that point, I was pretty positive on it. But like, I agree. I thought these characters, and I think especially because the performances behind them carried a personality and weight for me. Definitely not the most deep of characters, but that personally didn't bother me.
There's also like major pacing issues if we start spending more time with them, because it's about 25 to 30 minutes before we get where we need to go. And to be fair, I quite liked it as a prologue because it sets the Weyland-Yutani as being horrible, which we all know, but it sort of personalises it more with the Kaylee Spaner thing and the fact that, you know, you talk about reshoots, right? There's one sequence there, because you mentioned it before I went to the screen, and I had to read your comment because part of me loves you to pieces and part of me feels like, no, God, maybe he's got something interesting to say. But and all jokes aside, you said about, I wouldn't it be interesting to talk about the reshoots? We'll get onto that later specifically, because I think you may have a point there, but I might argue against that. There's one clear one here for me. Is when the ship goes up to the atmosphere, we cut back and there's a guy having a cigarette, isn't there, watching? Yeah, that's the landlord. You can tell that's the landlord of who she's not answering the call to because she owes them rent. It's mentioned in the beginning of it when the phone's going off and she wakes up. It's like, and then they have the joke in the canteen. That to me is like most definitely a scene that was cut for pacing, and it artistically showcases. And that's what I wanted to mention with the work print of Alien, is that the edit in these films is so integral about getting rid of excess fat and choosing what is integral and what essentially is just throwaway stuff. And I think when this Blu-ray comes out, if the Blu-ray has a bit more depth to it, which I would hope so from Disney, although it will come straight to Disney Plus, won't it? I bet there's a few deleted scenes here on that planet. But I just think that if you add them in, I think it's a very good balance it is, but I think if you add them in, you get towards the middle where it becomes really quite sluggish, and then we go to like a second act, which is just momentum, cut back to pause, momentum, cut back to pause. Then we get into a third act, which feels like stop, start, stop, start. Then we get to like a fourth act, very much like the original Alien anyway. Stop, start, stop. It feels very much like, oh, okay, back, we're in it. Oh, okay, we're back, we're in it. And I think that is an issue of the writing, and that there's a lack of flow with perhaps where to leave this as well. And I think with the because Ridley Scott at the premiere said that the first cut was like it was too long. I'm gonna give you some notes. You can go kick a wall and smash a window, whatever. I'm not going to tell you them. I'm going to write them down. And he's like, the first thing was like it was just too long. And the interviewer asked him how long was it. He's like, I can't tell you. Now I don't. Is this 150 something? Is it an hour and 51 minutes? It's something on that level, isn't it? Am I right?
Right now, it's like 1:59, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
This to me
Yeah,
felt like it was
1:59.
an hour and a half at one point when it was going to end, and then there's another half an hour on it. So there's definitely a lot more material. But again, I think we just go back to those characters. There are caricatures, archetypes, but we all know where this is going, and I think that the ones that end up staying longer ultimately have that arc that was more fulfilling than the others. So I think it sort of balanced it out.
Maybe I'll ask a question before we get into spoilers, because I do want to engage in the spoiler conversation here. But like, talking about this, and we keep comparing it to like Alien and the franchise that came before it, what are the reasons that you guys would ever turn this on over Alien or Aliens, or like the highlights of this franchise? If it's doing largely the same stuff, what is unique about Alien Romulus to where you're like, that I would watch that for this reason compared to the others?
There's one thing, and I'm sorry because I know Nick will probably have something really important to say rather than me just being like, I think I'm going to state the obvious here, but I don't know if you two have engaged with the discourse, but I think literally every person who is not a fanatic of this film says it's the third best Alien movie. It's the third best. It's Alien, Aliens, and this. And and I was listening to Robert Meyer Burnett, who's on who has his own little thing now. It's interesting. He's very much into Star Trek, but it's very much interesting to talk about Alien Romulus. And he was like, "Why are people saying that?" And it was interesting discourse about why are people saying that? Is it because it's the best one of the three, or is it because it's the newest? And I think it's a bit of both in the fact that because it's new and fresh, it feels distinctively different, and I think that overlaps the idea that it's new and fresh narratively. I think it's got a new lick of paint. I think if everyone has a car or a dog or anything like that, like when it like stinks or it's covered in shit, it looks rugged, and when it has a clean, it looks new. I think, in a very strange analogy, I think this has got a gleam of paint on, and it's not so different from what we've just seen before. And I think that's the idea of what presented as new, which I think we'll have to get into later because there's problems with that with me definitely. But I also think that it's comfort food. It's the Rogue One. It's that it will take you on the journey. You have no work to do. With Revenge of the Sith, or at least with a New Hope, you've got to sort of go with those features for the issues of what they've got, but also you've got to piece together quite a lot of stuff in between, and you've got to make your mind up why these characters are like that and this and that. Not to particularly degree anymore, because that era now for Disney has been like imploded. Which, Jesus, God help any of those fans anymore. But I also think that this is the same way in that Rogue One bridged the gap, not just narratively, but we'll get you there. You want to watch Alien, don't you? Watch Romulus, and then you'll get into Aliens, and then you like that, and you'll finish it. I think it's just one of those things where it's added sugar in water, and you can't stop drinking it. You can't stop drinking it because it's that sugar thing. But after a while, it's probably a bit too much sickening. So I hope those two answers probably give it away. And again, they're both very cynical, and I hate to say it because to answer your question, where would I watch this again? I'd watch it straight after Alien. I would watch it straight. I would not watch this on its own because I don't think it works as best like that now because I've seen it. This doesn't work frightening to me anymore. This doesn't work on a thematic level because it holds no cards aside from connective tissue that's fun to watch, and then that begs the question: well, what is then fan service through a fan film? And that's where you get into like, who is this for? Is it for the? I don't know. I'll let Nick answer because it hurts my brain. But I hope that answered. I think it's a difficult one. I really do.
Yeah, it is. It is complicated. I do pretty much agree with everything you said, actually, Jack. To be honest, like
I
if
thought
I
you
were
would
to
do.
think, as I often do,
I'm
it is
joking.
known. No, but like if I were to talk about it from my perspective, it would probably be for the same reason that I would watch the Evil Dead remake that Fede Álvarez made. It's not my favorite of the series that came before, but it has everything that you want in a convenient package. It is, like you said, Jack, the comfort food version of that experience. And especially, I think the Rogue One comparison is very apt, like you mentioned as well in the beginning, Carson, um, because it's so like people love Rogue One because it gave them Vader just slaughtering a lot of people, and people are loving this one because it gives you all of the movies that came before in a nice tight little package. You want to watch Alien, but you know, like, takes a long time. It's just the one alien. You can watch Aliens. Aliens is multiple aliens, it's more action, but the horror, it's not there, or things like that. This one gives you everything that you want, It has the shitty, grimy planet. It has the multiple alien, 1 alien, 50 aliens. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It does everything you want. Throw it at the wall. It'll stick. It's comfort. I can confirm, like, there was one guy next to me, 40-ish years old, and he was talking to his buddy before the movie started how much he fucking hated the last movies. He called Covenant dog shit. I was like, oh boy, here we go. Movie cut to credits. I turned to this guy. He was just grinning. He was so happy. He just left the theater with his buddy, just like, oh, it was so cool, that thing happened, the other thing happened, oh my god, This is who it's made for. Like, it's for those people, like we were saying. Fair enough. I would probably, honestly, like you said, like you asked Carson, like, I would watch it just for the, like, turning my brain off. I just want the set pieces. I just want to see those sequences because they're cool, they look cool, but I don't want to be engaged on any deeper level. Even though I literally think every other movie, except maybe Alien 3, it's the only one I'm not too warm about, to be honest.
Stop.
But this one, I think, really doesn't have anything that's special that other movies haven't done better. There's nothing that feels natural. There's nothing that feels organic. You were talking about the main cast in the original. They're not complicated characters, but they feel real. The interactions that they have are real interactions that workers on the ship would have. In here, instead, every single dialogue in the first half is, oh, like, my parents are dead because they were spent too much time in the mines. Oh, our parents are in here. Oh, I really love my sister because she's younger than me and I want to protect her. Oh, my parents are dead because of an android and that's why I hate androids. It's like that's just, I don't. It is a classic, like, Disney type of script, Disney type of character development, character growth. I added, like, new things. Sorry, Carson. Why would you watch Alien Romulus again?
Can I
Before we go ahead?
You go, Jack. You go first.
I'm gonna set back you here because I actually think that's a conscious thing. The characters in the Alien were in the 40s. They were in the late 30s, early 40s. They had far different issues on an economic level about wanting to get paid, labour, stuff like that, and then it reinforces the 70s thing. And Fede's been quite conscious about that. He saw at the beginning of Aliens, the deleted scene about Newt and a brother. It's like, I wanted to see those kids. I want to see how kids would interact in a world like this. Because it's always the adults who have to deal with the economics, the psychological, and also the health issues. This world doesn't care about them. I think it's interesting to put in a not a teenage viewpoint on it, but I think it's interesting to look at very young adults who have the next bit of their life ultimately knowing they're already dead. I think that's a really interesting thematic, is that if they stay there and they're on the early 20s, their death certificate's already written. They know where they're going to be. It's A, B, and C, their life. They know where their second act is going to be, and they're not going to have a third one. I think that richness of trying to escape and then watching essentially young adults have to have a vie for survival, which should come years later in very different circumstances, at least. I think it's an interesting thematic. But I would, just because I know you were going to ask Cass as well, I'm going to probably say the same thing. I think you've actually highlighted it earlier, and you mentioned it. Marvel. Why would you watch Captain Marvel if not for Avengers Endgame? Why would you watch Age of Ultron? God, oh my God! Don't say Captain Marvel. Oh my God!
The lights just flickered in.
Honestly, please. He's looking at Wonder Woman poster for the Energy, but frightening, wasn't it? We won't mention that again. I'll be very quick here then. Yeah, but it's interesting that when you look at why would you watch Age of Ultron aside from getting information for Civil War, it feels like we're going in to make 20 minutes of narrative into 3 hours, and I think that's the course now. It's that, if someone had a lightsaber and it was green and it was blue, why is that? We needed 17 hours to tell us. I think it's part of not wanting to pay new writers. I think it's also part of residuals. I think it's laziness. I think we've got people in positions of power who see money and don't see writing and don't see craft. I think it's a multitude of reasons. But again, like Nick was going to ask you, for someone who's even more so like lukewarm on the franchise, let's say, I can't see why anyone who was I can't see anyone who genuinely is lukewarm, or I mean, granted they probably wouldn't see the film, but anyone who finds this sort of like, yeah, okay, would ever go watch this again. It doesn't work on a narrative level for them. It doesn't work on a thematic level. It very much feels in tune of working in a 7-piece saga that's filling blanks.
Well, hold on. I do like this franchise. Let's be clear. I'm a big fan of Alien.
Ouch.
I must say, like, that's what I'm getting at, though, is like
Mhm.
hearing our discussion, and like not to turn this into being a negative Nancy, but like, and I still think this film works as a fun roller coaster ride. I think specifically you have the benefit of like it's fun to go see an Alien movie on the big screen, right? Like
Yes.
you can't do that right now, but like when this leaves the big screen. With how theaters are probably in 2 weeks, that was more sarcasm to be clear at home. Like, doesn't that suck? Doesn't this film like kind of suck? Like with everything we're saying, like everything we're saying about this film narratively, everything we're talking about the film, like we just keep bringing up these issues. We keep bringing up like, oh, it's just as taking from these other films. Like I can go watch after this out in theaters, Alien or Aliens or Alien 3. Sorry, Nick. Any day of the week, like I watch Prometheus, like, and they all do this better. They all are more interesting. They're all don't have this weird Rogue One element that we're talking about. Like, I don't know. I still think this film was fun, but I'm quickly kind of turning on this film. I realize sitting here talking about it where I'm like, what is this film like doing? Why is this film great? Because everything we're saying, we're like, oh, that kind of works. Or we're like, oh, that was a really awkward reference. That was a really awkward pacing. That's really awkward. Like, yes, there's good set pieces. I agree about the gravity, Nick, but like, I don't know. Again, like, not to compare this to Prey, but I think you kind of have to. There's reasons to go watch Prey because that is something unique within that franchise. It's not just doing everything over and over again that's been done. This film it's not necessarily doing it that well. I think we're all kind of like, oh, it's fun to go see on the big screen because we like Alien, but like beyond that, I'm not getting a lot from our conversation. I'm not finding a lot of elements where I'm like, ooh, that film does. Like, we just went around and we can't really even list reasons why we would go see this or watch this over Alien or Aliens. Like, where like it doesn't work in comparing it to Captain Marvel. Disney, please let my lights stay on. I do like Captain Marvel. Like what are we doing, right? Like this movie's not that good, and maybe it's actually disappointing to be as part of the franchise. I don't know. That's where I'm starting to kind of turn.
Can we go into spoilers up with this?
Let's go into spoilers from this point on, just to be clear. Go continue the conversation. I was just saying you can also talk about spoilers now.
I think this is not new for this franchise. If you go back to 1992, after essentially 8 years of just them not having any idea what to do, they decided to go a philosophical route of using the alien as a third party, but ultimately unravel the human psyche and the debris of what this causes about who will turn on who. And I think it's in Alien and it's in Aliens, but it goes onto a deeper, richer level with Alien 3, not especially in the assembly cut about these people are monsters, but there's also that in the corner. And where do you find the level of not integrity, but balance of evil meets good? What is that line? Because it's so thin in this franchise throughout. Because there's multiple mentions here. If we're getting into spoilers about, there's a certain character here, which I'll let someone else go to spoilers because I feel like I talked too much after this. But there's a conscious idea of helping the human race. Well, that only felt like was for the company, which is mentioned. So that comes at a dissonance. But in 1992 they had the issue here with Alien 3. They also had it in 97 where they talk about more about motherhood and the womb and about the alien comes from us. It has to be birthed from us. Yet kills us. There's like a Freudian thing there as well. It's such an interesting aspect. Execution is a French idealist, but it's an interesting idea. And they sacrificed that for corporate schlock with Alien vs. Predator and vs. Predator 2. And the issue then came about in 2012 once again, is that someone went back to the well and was like, I'm not making a silly movie with a CGI xenomorph here. That's dead. That we've beaten that to death. Let's go back to the point of ask, where did it come from? Philosophical aspects that reinforce questions from the audience as well. We have to work with it. It's not watching cartoons and watching just shit get eaten and blow up and people die, like the Marvel stuff, or even to a certain extent Romulus. But there were conscious decisions there to ask. That should scare you, that the people who made us do not want us here anymore. Why? What have we done? We go back about making people, and there's that parallel with Prometheus. Covenant, on a more financial level, had to go back into the idea of going back to Alien, but also reinforcing the Prometheus storyline, which I think is masterfully done. We've now sort of gone back from that and gone back to the idea of the corporate contemporary issues that we want schlock. This is far better than Alien versus Predator. But equally, once you break these down, and I don't like you said, Carson, the more you break it down, the more horrific this is probably going to be on a score level. They're not too dissimilar. They come from two directors who make genre works, who understand what franchises have. One is Resident Evil, this is Alien vs Predator. He's been in 2, Evil Dead and The Girl with the Spider's Web. We'll get to that later, because I'm sure 2 people here, I hope have seen that, because no fucker else has, aside from me at AMC in Chicago at 11 o'clock at night. Dear me. But we seem to have gone back and forth. And again, I think the question is, who's making that decision? Do you think it's the audience or the producers? And I have to say, I think people rejected Covenant because it came out in a time where, in political stances, and I'm going to go here, there was a time within the society where people did not want to question their decisions. They just wanted to make them and didn't realise at what cost. And I think, granted, they're 2 very different things, but people don't want to be educated by cinema in any way. They don't want to be essentially prosecuted for certain comments about how we want to deal with the female form in that film. How you've got Hillary versus Trump. There's a lot of Clinton versus Trump, but you've got a lot of stuff there where I think that's very much apparent in that discourse. And what the financially successful films at the time? Spider-Man: Homecoming. It's about a kid who dresses up, and then we go into the Avengers stuff. There's very different times, I think, where the culture, the society, we reject the cinematic quality at the time because of those thematics. Here, we're at a point in the calm before the storm, I think, where we're gearing up for something else as well, in that I think audiences are only wanting to go to the cinema for schlock. Oppenheimer and Barbie are 2 interesting case studies. You go back to our episode where we spoke about it separately, but we come back now, and you ask that's a question like, who is this made for? I have to say that I think it's just a very soft reboot of like, just give them everything, get them back on board. You know, Disney Plus have only just made a profit since the creation, which was 2018, 2017, or maybe a bit later. Sorry, that's quite frightening. Granted, it took Netflix like till 2017, and they started in 2004, 2007. So it's interesting. Is this a financial thing? Is this just giving people memories in the canon, like, oh, there's an Alien movie out there? I don't know. I would tend to think that this is just give them everything. Let's do the Marvel thing, and I do think that's the Rogue One things. I'm sorry to go on, Nick. You start with the spoilers, but I genuinely think that's primarily a reason what we've got here.
Well, I need to jump in really quickly because, number one, I'm happy that we're probably the only Alien Romulus review to mention Hillary versus Trump.
I do apologize for that.
I will push... No, it's fine. I'll push even further. Say, though, at least Alien versus Predator has Alien versus Predator, which is something new we haven't seen. There is something there. This film doesn't even have that. And I think AVP, I just watched that for the first time this week, kind of slaps, not gonna lie. But it at least, not because it's good or has these characters or depth, but at least there's something action-wise that is new, that is interesting. If you look at introducing those 2 characters fighting versus now they play with gravity for 20 minutes, I don't know if that really even can be compared. I also mentioned the Covenant. I think Covenant also has just a weird release date, has a weird release strategy with trailers and marketing and everything, and that's fascinating to get into at one point. But there's a lot there with that. But so even to your point though, so this is the most, I would say then, my thesis, most reductive film in the franchise, even compared to Alien vs. Predator. I've not seen the second Alien vs. Predator, so maybe that is there. But
that's a great take.
I don't know. Then I don't know. I'm getting really negative towards this film. I don't mean to, audience at home. I'm so sorry. Yes, I have.
When I first saw that, I felt the same way. I was like, what are we doing here? As time has gone by and you see this franchise evolve, there are massive swings with that film, in a sense of we're actually asking about motherhood here, which I think is so interesting with the mother AI thing, which is incorporated. And I do think there's quirks there, but it ultimately adds grain and texture to a feature that's quite giving a conscious effort to change a few things by giving you the same thing. I feel like this actually takes quite a considerable amount from Resurrection, which I found quite shocking, considering that you've got essentially two magnus opuses in a franchise. A third film that's very maligned but very, very good. And a fourth film that's considered to be the weakest of any sort of franchise. But I think you look back now, and we look back at a franchise that at least gave it to a French auteur who made Delicatessen, which is The City of Lost Children. A very
Amelie.
an incredibly gifted filmmaker in his own right, very artistic, very thematically gifted, aesthetically as well, which he incorporates. There was risks. I don't think Álvarez here is a risk. I think it's a certified position. We'll give it the guy who can make horror, and I think that's all well and good to get you back on the table, and I think get you back in the game. But you still need to you still need to deal your cards there. And if you get a pair and you think you're winning, you know you know what, you're involved, but you're not really making any sort of addition. And I agree. I agree to your point. The more you talk about this, the more reductive the feature is. But essentially, you have to ask the question of, like you asked before, not to go back to it, but who is this for, and who is this made by? And I think it's made by corporate assets for an audience that wants to just keep them on standby. I don't really know why though, but I think it's interesting to talk about where we go with spoilers here, because that comes into the decisions they make here, which I'll let Nick go in because he's already tried to do it 3 times. Sorry.
Well, he's gonna wait for us because I do have to jump in just so quickly. I just want to clarify that I think Álvarez does a really good job, and this is prime Álvarez, right? As a director, he's not necessarily one to take risks or build these wild stories. I think he does fantastic here, and this is definitely the direction given to him, as you mentioned earlier. So peace and love Álvarez here for what he's doing. I just think this is made for TikTok brain rot. Truly, I think it's made to be that's a reference. Get on the 15-second TikTok. That's just what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. And I'm I don't have TikTok brain rot. Hopefully not that badly, at least. So I don't know. For me, this is too much. But Nick, please get into spoilers. I'm so sorry.
No. I had no rush in getting to spoilers. No, I agree with what you're saying, and it just, man, there were so many moments in here that the more I think about it, the more they piss me off. In terms of spoilers, for instance, just again the character deaths felt very understated. Kind of most of them, like the pilot when she dies. The whole idea, I heard about it, I forgot about it beforehand, but the idea of you can see the chest burster with the X-ray. I don't know, it didn't feel very special the way they shot it. It's just one of those moments, it's a bit too close. And then she dies, and it's probably the weakest chest bursting scene we've had in any of these movies. We're just kind of oh, it's all dark, just spurts of blood, and maybe there's a bit of chest showing. All those little moments, the guy who gets acid on top of him starts gnarly with his fingers being eaten away, but then it just cuts. Oh, he's dead. Shot
I agree with that.
Spring in the chest, he's dead. Okay, fine. All those moments didn't really hit for me. But then you get to the main reason why a lot of people have been criticizing this movie, which is bringing back Ian Holm to be essentially the main villain once again of an Alien movie, which is completely unnecessary in my opinion. Because why do we need to bring back this character as another... why do we need to bring back this actor as another character? Because it's not even the same android from the Nostromo, which is baffling. So they do some choices like that, using CGI and artificial intelligence as well. It was listed in the credits with voice recognition, artificial intelligence to use Ian Holm, his likeness and voice. It felt distasteful in a movie that's already adding a lot in to just be point and clap, not in a way that's too bad compared to other films, but still, you have a lot of overt references to the previous films, but to have the actual digital recreation of a dead man to make him look like he looked 50 years ago, it's why? What's it adding here? No one was excited in the screening I was at. I do wonder if anyone was excited seeing it on screen, because compared to other moments, yeah, you can be into it, I guess, when he says, "Get away from her, ... you bitch." But that scene, man, to bring him back, why? And he's always on a TV screen. He's always giving video game instructions and directions. Go to this place, do this thing, press the button. It's oh man, it adds nothing. And again, we've had murderous android who prefers to prioritize the mission to human life and empathy. We've had that before, and they also do the same thing with the character Andy. It's like, okay, and at the end he's going to be separated in some, like he's going to separate himself from this evil villainous side. But what really frustrated me is that this is called Alien Romulus, and they make a very big point of, oh, this film is set on the Romulus and Remus ship. It's like two ships docked together, one side and the other. And for listeners who don't know, like Romulus and Remus, they were the founders of Rome. They're like the like without them you wouldn't have Rome. They were brothers. They have a long story about being raised by a wolf in the wilderness. You know, it's kind of like the Jesus tale. You've heard it before. It's mythology. It just repeats itself.
I read it
But
every
the
night.
whole but the whole thing is that, you know, like the entire franchise also has a lot of mythological references and references to
Prometheus,
art, Prometheus, and other things. But with this, like the whole thing about Romulus and Remus is that just like Cain and Abel, Romulus killed Remus because he was getting too big, and they were arguing a lot. They were starting to build Rome and all of that, and so he ultimately killed him. I was like, oh, okay, Romulus and Remus. You have Kaylee Spaney and David Johnson, you know, Rain and Andy. It's like brothers and sister. He's going to sacrifice himself. Either she has to kill him at the end, or he has to sacrifice himself to save her. And instead, we don't get that. I was so excited. I was like, oh, we're going to do something like repurposing the mytho into something with the narrative. And they don't even do that, which surprised me. At least it ends similarly to Evil Dead with an incredibly schlocky shock fest at the end with Prometheus baby coming to life and starts chasing around Kaylee Spaney. It felt a bit stilted in presentation and movements. Probably a downside of using puppetry more so than CGI, because you could feel that like there's a lot of tension here supposedly, but this guy moves very slowly. Doesn't feel too menacing. But I like the whole sequence, to be honest. But yeah, like all of those things I'm very conflicted with. I'm curious to know how you guys felt about those more
I'm
spoiler
probably gonna
specific
get
parts.
I'm probably gonna get fucking crucified here. There's a few bits to break down there. So the first one is that I understand your issue about when the uh, skinhead girl with the buzz cut gets killed. But there's a theme that he does here. Fede Álvarez. I'm like, you need to stop this after the second time. It's show and tell. He shows us something because she does their arm when she looks at her bones, and you know it's coming back. He does the same thing with the rat later on. It's always a thing where he shows us something and never tells, which I don't mind, but it's reiterated all the time throughout this film. Like that's again goes back to the point where it feels so repetitive, even on a narrative level, but at a tonal level. Like, okay, and stop and start the whole thing. It just pisses me off. It really slows down proceedings. It's like just let's have a bit of an idea of like give something the audience to think about. You don't need to tell them all the time for everything. Quickly on the Ian Holm thing, right? Crucify me here, absolutely fucking crucify me. I have absolutely no problem if they get the permission from the estate from someone who's deceased and the family's estate get paid for it and they get paid residuals. I have no problem with the Peter Cushing estate. I have no problem here with the James Earl Jones estate when he gets paid after when he passes for the Star Wars thing. As long as the residuals pay him out and they pay that family estate, I have no problem. If that's the legal level we're at, then I have no issue. The problem I have here with this inclusion is that it is so unabashedly unneeded. Like it was spoiled for me because it said someone comes back. It's like the CGI monstrosity, and then someone saw Rogue One. So automatically I was thinking like Lance Henriksen's coming back as Bishop, which I thought was so funny. That Bishop, then you've got Rook, the chess thing. Like okay, we're doing something here. Like okay, like fair enough. Like because Bishop's quite friendly and he's subservient and he's helpful to the human. Then you've got Rook who's who's opposite essentially on the board, and he sort of is with the humans, but he's sort of at the detriment of them as well. But if it was just that sequence, I would have no issue with it. But like you said, we're going back and we're going back and we're going back, and it's a case not necessarily of the Ian Holm thing. It's just a narrative. It's like we're going back, and we're going back, and then we're going back. And to me, it's like I get this situation where they just feel like they don't have enough of it, what they paid for, so they need more. Because when he's on the floor, I was like, okay, that's like an android in an Alien franchise. We've seen 5 of them now. Well, 5 different types of characters. You've got Ash, you've got Bishop, you've got David, and you've got what's Cal in Resurrection played by another rider. Then you have Walter, and then now you have Rook. I'm like, okay, so you can just know that something's going to come on. There has to be an android in it. And then when he's propped up and it's in the shadows and it like starts up, I was like, oh shit, this is a cute little thing they're doing. And then it talks, and I'm like, ooh, this is like first, second. It's very poor. I think it'll probably be remastered for a Blu-ray release at least. But yeah, very poor. Took you out straight away. And I remember, and she's going to listen to this, so she best agree with me. I took my wife to watch Rogue One opening night at fucking midnight. Never should have done it. I think she went. I literally think that she went back to America the day after, the morning after. It was so bad. She never have taken it. But when Tarkin came on there and we saw the mirror, I was like, oh. And she's like, shut up, I'm watching. And then he turned around. I'm like, oh my God. And she's like, what are you on about? Who is it? And I'm like, he's been dead since 1994. And it felt like it felt like it had to be an aspect of that production, but also in hindsight, it's felt detrimental to it. This feels neither that it feels integral and it feels wholeheartedly detrimental proceedings. And the only thing I can sort of defend it for with the integral aspect on the screen is that's the Alien Isolation influence here. I'm that's clutching me at fucking straws there, but yeah,
I can see
too
that actually,
much.
yeah.
And I've heard loads of people say like, why wasn't it just someone else? And I thought to myself, I was like, yeah, it could have been anybody because the whatever they tell you is not exactly exclusive to that character anyway. It's more of the overall tone of everything. So I completely wholeheartedly, it's too much. Again, I have no slight issue with the fact that it's Ian Holm. I just think it was very interesting, the fact of in this world, who that could be. And we're doing the Star Wars thing again, is that we've got such a big galaxy, but there's only a very small story. And I think for what we're trying to do here, it actually, in a unconscious way, actually explains the whole thing. You've got something new and fresh, but really it's the old same shit you've seen before with a new coat of paint that isn't quite right yet. And I think there's going to be a lot of detractors here. And again, I think your conspiracy here, we don't SEO, Hillary Trump conspiracy. Carson's fucked on this one, but I think your theory about that being a reshoot, I'm in 50-50 there. The part that we come up in the shadows, I'm like, okay. Another part I'm thinking, well, it takes a long time to do that, but then with the result, I'm like, maybe it wasn't that long to do. But who else? I don't know. I just think it's a very small-minded application, but I'll move on.
I think one more SEO word. I'm gonna have to take off my bros hat. I don't want to be targeted for anything today. I literally could not agree more than anything. Like Jack, I cannot add on much more than anything. I agree with the morals of it. I agree with the execution of it. That's my biggest issue. Is it's not needed for the screenplay. It's not good visually. It's distracting. Narratively, it's distracting. I found that to be probably the most boring part of this. Where everything else is operating on at least a high technical level. That's just where it really started to lose me, and I just started to be like, yeah, maybe this isn't that. Like that element really bothered me, but I really couldn't go much deeper.
It lost its enthusiasm as soon as after the first scene. Yeah. It was like it was there, and then we look up and we see the original big chap alien, and I was like, oh, okay, there's a history there. We'll find out in a comic book, I'm sure. Again, we're going back to the Disney-fied thing of it, which with a Marvel, we're definitely going that route, and everything we're going to add here ultimately is going to come to that conclusion, I fear. The mythology, we'll explain it in a separate piece of media where they can buy it. But we'll explain it later. Okay, whatever. I've got the Matrix comic books, but I can watch the films. Here, they get away with it, but how are they getting the big chap? And I remember someone optioned a plot hole here, is that why would a company with all that time and space, the issues of what the thematic is about, trying to find the Prometheus liquid to help human life from being immortal, why would Weyland-Yutani leave that alone, disintegrating over it? And there's two schools of thought here. One, they don't know about it, or B, Ian Holmes' character says that they'll be at the colony in 6 years. I don't know if anyone mentioned how long those incursions had happened on that space station. Apparently, it was like 106 days. So the whale and Yutani would never get there as quick, but they sure as shit got there in Alien 3. So there's bits where, and I've heard a lot in the canon, people say, well, the alien metamorphosis is quickened here, but these are not aliens. These are clones. These are manufactured from us. And this is what I wanted to bring up to Nick. Romulus and Remus are not about Andy and Rain. It's about us and the alien. We built them. They kill us. They come out of us. We're like a synergy with them. And I feel that's the idea of it. Where that gets lost is that it's just not very profound, even though the actual arc is quite poignant in a way. We're building something that's wanting to kill us, that comes out of us after we've manufactured it. I find something like poetically evil about that, essentially. But that is not AI. We're building something that's going to help us, that's actually killing industries, that's killing foundations, that's ultimately killing livelihoods in the future when it becomes a singularity anyway. But there's a lot of richness there. That's not the film. That's the Covenant. That's Prometheus. This is not Romulus, which is like, we're going to run around a station and we're going to be very cold in a room and face it. Just like, it's all very much surface to me. But what probably pains me more is what we're discussing here. I think that subtext is here in richness. You've got to find it though. You've got to work for it. And again, I do think this holds your hand too much to get those formulas out. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to assess those stuff because it must have been very difficult to hand the reins to someone who just wanted to make a roller coaster ride of an alien thing. And there'll be a lot of people, detractors, who will listen to this and go, well, I saw Alien in 1979 and I watched it in 1986, and all it was is a group of people trying to escape from an alien. And you could say that in Resurrections, you could say that in Alien 3, you could say that in Covenant and Prometheus. But I feel like we've evolved past that point now. We've gone past that to a degree where I think we're ready for something else now. I don't think we can be doing the same shit all the time now. And I think this just ultimately succumbs to that idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that you can have a dual opinion on this film, right? It's complex. You can say this is a fun watch in the theater and say it works for what it's trying to be as a roller coaster ride. It's simplistic. It follows those beats. And also accept that you wish it was more and that there could have been more. And even with those thematic depths buried within this, there was so much room and so much energy and so much potential here to bring that out and create something really poignant, create something really memorable. Outside of just being like a generalized fun theater time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that is going to stick with me. And I think for me, even if it's still a fun theater time, and I would recommend, kind of maybe slowly drifting towards closing thoughts, I would recommend anyone interested in this, go watch it in the theater. It is a great time. It's one of the most fun times I've had in the theater this year. Not that it's necessarily been the strongest year in the world for fun theater experiences, but like I cannot recommend that enough because it is fun. But ultimately, it's kind of like a meal. And you mentioned this like every single week, where it's like you can go to McDonald's and have a meal and it's like fine, but it's not going to leave an impact. It's not going to fill you. It's not going to give you that deeper sense. I will not be thinking about this film in a month. I will not be thinking about this film in a year. I will not be revisiting this film unless like my friends are watching it and it's there. It's perfectly serviceable, especially in the theater. But I think there was so much more. And again, with Álvarez, like I'm really waiting for him. In a sense, kind of, well, I would say he's a better director than Gareth Edwards, but in the same way, kind of, where I'm like, they're really good directors, and I just really hope they eventually embrace other people's screenplays, because I think if they had a screenplay that was stronger, as a director, they could just make it soar. For me, really good directing, not necessarily engaging or interesting screenplay, but also I think that's largely on a corporate level and what this film was trying to achieve. So, yeah, it's what it is.
I mean, there's one thing in a spoiler note, probably just to mention last. I think it's the actual MacGuffin here, like what we're actually here for, contextual in the plot. It's an interesting one because it feels like Álvarez is trying to connect the two things together in a feature that's not really the one to do it in. And I think it's an interesting one because when this was announced, there was idea it's going to be a standalone Alien movie. It was like, oh shit, here we go. And then it reminded me when Resurrection was announced, and it was like, oh, they're not gonna really have a conversation about Reload and Revolutions, which to me was like, well, how can we not have a conversation if he dies in Revolutions and he's brought back at Resurrections? They have to. And the same thought came across here, is like, we've got to have a conversation here, because I watched very little about this aside from someone saying it's 20 years between Alien and Aliens. That to me is not, it's a conscious decision. So I was like, oh, right, well, here we go. Because you could have this any time and it wouldn't really matter. But the fact that it's consciously after 20 years, and I like the start. I like how they spend all this money to find this thing, and the idea is that, again, like, they just want to find this thing and bring it back because they can make millions of dollars out of it. It sort of subverts the expectation here about the sequels in a sense, especially Burke, in that they've caught the big chap, and they're not remaking it to make clones like they did in Resurrections. They're redefining its DNA strand to find out how we can take that to find its evolutionary purposes and save the human race. I thought, and then it name drops Peter Weyland on the Prometheus expedition, and that black goo is on there, and it sort of recontextualized Prometheus in a way, because the black goo disrupts people and takes them down and stuff, and the idea that is that then a form of the pathogen that ultimately create the alien, but then David uses that pathogen to make the alien in Covenant as well. So I do believe it adds slight texture, but Jesus wept, you need to put the pieces together yourself, because there's like the Elizabeth Shaw theme plays, and I was like, oh God, just give me that fucking sequel. Jesus Christ, come on, it's been 5 years. Just give me it. What are we waiting for? Honestly, and I got to the point where I'm like, I really appreciated that, because there was no doubt that he was there, Ridley Scott. And granted, the Scott Fire Productions are going to produce these anyway, Scott Free, sorry, because he's doing the Noah Hawley thing, which we'll have to talk about at some point in the future. It's frightening, because the teaser is playing on a lot of cineplexes. He didn't play at mine. And if it's true, it looks horrific, because it's a reflection of the alien, and then it goes down, we see the teeth, and it bites. And I'm like, we have the reflection of Earth. Whew, I don't know about that, because that's a jump for me too much. But I get back to the point. There is a canon aspect of really honouring the Scott universe, and there's other people who've come in here and fucked this universe up a little bit. And I like the fact that someone's come in and, like, because we joked about this on another, I think we may have been off air, about when Ridley Scott phoned into Comic-Con and was like, Fede, hard question, rank all the Alien movies. And he's like, because it's like Geordie classic humour, like making someone squirm. And like he had to rank the Alien movies. And then I've read the letter where he goes, oh, dear Fede, don't fuck this up. And all those tongue-in-cheek things to me was like, oh, like, yeah, he likes this. But knowing Ridley Scott, why does he like it? Because it honours what came before it, and it does not change the canon of what will happen with David. And I did think at one point for fan service, I was like, mention him. Because it mentions, I got to sound like I was like, there's that in my aura there, like, you know, like the witch, like, come on. But I was like really hoping there would be some sort of canon mention, or at least to mend the two, because technically as of yet, we've got to get to Alien. We've got at least one more feature to connect the two, and we can get the dots almost. But there's been no sort of connection. This cements it. It does. There's no escaping from 20th century now, or fans. They're the same thing. Covenant leads into Alien, that leads into Romulus, that leads into the next ones. There's no disassociation now. There's no theory. There's no fan discourse. They are now connected, for good or for bad. I think the one positive thing I'll probably end on before we go into final thoughts is I quite like that generosity of being like, I appreciate that I'm coming to this franchise, but I need to honour what came before it. And to an ode to the master, I want people to remember that he's also got his canon within this franchise. And I'll answer the Prometheus thing. That pathogen thing's very interesting. Where that leads up in the two sequels that come, obviously there's going to be something. I hope there's something else. I would have liked that it would have been sent somewhere else. We don't know the fact that these characters are taking it. We've got to see them again. Is there more Leatheridge in this story? I'm not too sure. But I really did like the fact that we connect them the two together. And there is a bit more canon upon that. Well, you know, we're experimenting now. We're doing what the engineers did. But we're not doing it for we're doing it in not to destroy people. We're doing it in our vanity. You know, I find that very interesting. But it's a slither in a genre specific piece. So that's the only thing I do, because I think we're all. I think I'm a big fan of Prometheus. I love Covenant, But that might just be a personal thing. But just very briefly, it'd be interesting how you two got there. Did you feel like it was fledging, like a floating down the river, or did you guys feel like it was a bit more of an honouring, or what did you? Because it's quite a vital MacGuffin, essentially, isn't it?
I think it feels part of just. It felt respectful in a way. I think to what came before. That's ironically with everything we talked about, even with the CGI, it does feel like it's made by someone who loves these films and loves all of them. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, in a way, that made me wish I was watching the third Prometheus film instead of this. So it's like, oh man, the places you could have gone to, It's never too late. Nowadays all movies are getting like late sequels. It's only been 7 years.
No, we're on a time thing here. We need this because we need this now.
Gladiator 2 is going to be a success. And that's going to bring... This is being a success, People want more Alien. People want more Ridley Scott.
That's true. I think we spoke about this, didn't we, Carson, about a few weeks ago, about that's the last big blockbuster to, like, I can make something else now. Yeah.
So hopefully,
Yeah. I'm just praying Gladiator 2 does well, because I think if that fails, might be the nail in the coffin. But we'll see. I thought it was respectful, again, in a way that, like, yeah, I agree with you, Nick. A lot of those, that's kind of where I am with, like, all this film. Whenever there's a reference or something, I'm like, well, I'd just rather be watching that movie, including the not made third Prometheus film. But I thought it was respectful enough. I didn't think it was, like, in bad taste or anything.
Yeah, and, like, if I were to say my final thoughts on this film, I don't know. I don't think there's much more you can do with Alien without being willing to take risks. I think a franchise like Predator, it's very easy to just do something new with it, which is just change setting. It's the jungle, now it's the city, now it's the Predator planet, now it's the Native America. You can just like keep changing that. Set Predator in freaking ancient Rome, who cares? That can work. With Alien, to just be content with yet another slasher in space, we don't need that. There's something more here. Ridley Scott has shown it, but even I think Alien Resurrection has some interesting themes, in my opinion. There's something more that can be done here with exploring just society, work-life balance, just the meaning of life and of religion. There's so much that can be done to that to just make this a cool looking, generally exciting, very silly at points movie that's just okay with being a genre piece. Fair enough. I love my genre movie, but like Carson said, it's just fast food. Doesn't leave anything. Gave me a lot of chuckles. There's one point where an alien dodges a falling elevator and then just like peeks around the corner, which is one of many ridiculous moments in here. But yeah, overall, I gave it a heart. I will leave the heart on my review, which means it's a recommendation. I would recommend people go watch it because it is a fun time right now in the cinema, maybe even rewatching it at home, but it's not going to last. Like, it won't have a lasting impression. So it's definitely going to be one of those movies that I think, like, give it 1 or 2 years, people have forgotten completely about it.
Taking a break from the episode, I want to tell you guys about a great sponsor we have for today's episode, and that is Zencastr. Now look, we've been recording podcasts for a long time here on ClapperCast, and in that time we have used multiple platforms to record and edit our episodes, but since going to Zencastr, we haven't looked back. Zencastr is an incredibly easy and free to use platform where you can record both audio and visual for your podcast. No more downloading apps or struggling to connect with guests. Instead, you can share a link to literally anyone and have them join through their browser for an episode to make your podcast streams a reality. Not only can you record with studio quality visual and audio, but you can also edit in a breeze. We love using Zencastr, and if you want to use Zencastr yourself, let me tell you about a pretty good deal. While yes, you can use Zencastr for free, there are also some great tools with a paid plan. If you want to go ahead and get yourself yourself a paid plan to make your podcast dreams a reality, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code ClapperCast, and you will get 30% off your first month of any Zencast paid plan. Again, let me tell you, I have been through the market. I have seen the different sites. I've seen the different apps. I've seen what everyone is using, and nobody is doing it like Zencastr. We love you here on the podcast, Zencastr. We wouldn't be what we are without you, and we would love to see all of our listeners go use Zencastr. Remember, code ClapperCast at zencastr.com/pricing to get 30% off your first month of any Zencast paid plan. With that, let's go back to the episode.
There won't be a legacy.
Damn. Well, I think that does it for our Alien Romulus review. If you want to see it, which I recommend in theaters, you can check it out exclusively in theaters right now. We'll be probably on Hulu or something eventually. But I think that they're going to give this a decent amount of time. There's not really much coming out over the next month. So that's that. Let's get to our question of the week, which we're asking, what is your favorite film to take place primarily on a spaceship? Jack, I'm going to send over to you first. What films did you enjoy that took you on a spaceship?
I generally thought this is probably like a hardest question you've asked. I had loads to choose from, but genuinely, it's really difficult to choose. I'll probably say...
Just say Passengers and move on.
No, to be fair, that generally did come up. There's so many. Let me just have a look, because I've got it written down. Because there was a few. Because I was just going to say Alien, but I was like, oh man, I can't say Alien. That just feels like cheating. I think they've got like Gravity and stuff. Oh god, what can I pick here? Oh my god, it all gets banned, doesn't it? No. Do you know what I will say? And I'll do this as generally I've had this written down. Don't worry. I'm going to say Steven Soderbergh's Solaris, because we did it on. I was meant to do. I can't remember if I did do it. I was meant to go on Uncut Gems about it, because I'd never seen it, because we were doing a Steven Soderbergh thing. I don't think I was on the podcast. I watched it afterwards, or maybe I was on it and I didn't. It was a good German. I can't remember. But it really shocked me how it took an hour, maybe 2 hours out of that film at least, and just made it to like a crippling feature about not only masculinity but about dependability on and trauma. I would say that it's a mind fuck of a feature. It's very simplistic but very much debilitating to watch. Quite obtuse in how you see it, because it sort of gives you everything and then nothing, and it's quite a difficult ride to watch of how passive it is. But for a feature for Soderbergh to remake Andrei Tarkovsky, the balls on that's like. Oof, that's crazy. But I'll just throw it out on wildcard. I'll say Steven Soderbergh's Solaris.
Nick,
I have like two groups of choices. This was also very hard for me, because I don't like sci-fi. I talked about it before. Like space sci-fi very rarely works for me. I would say, just if I had to say, like, oh my god, yes, the original Alien, but that was like, we're talking about Alien. I'm not going to talk about that. For horror films that are set in a spaceship, decent quality, Event Horizon, same director as Alien versus Predator, by the way. It's a very fun movie. I do really wish one day we will see the actual original cut. That's like, I think of all the movies, we're never going to see that, I know, but a man can dream. Of all the movies that have lost footage, I think this is one of the most deserving ones to have it found. But we'll see. Otherwise, on the opposite side of the spectrum of like horror, sci-fi, Jason X, I think it's a lot of just fun, dumb schlock. But for more serious movies, they're actually very related. They're related to what you said, Jack. But even between one another, they do work. It is Tarkovsky's Solaris, but also Claire Denis' High Life. Both of them are very similar. Like Claire Denis is very indebted to Tarkovsky's work. But the way they both tackle, one film tackles grief primarily, and the other one tackles procreation, like the continuation of humanity, life, motherhood, fatherhood, and all of that. It's one of those movies, High Life, that I watched it in 2018, I think it came out, and I was like, I don't like this film. And weirdly enough, I've just kept thinking about it. Like it just pops into my mind randomly to this day, which is always a sign of a very good film. You don't. It's the opposite of Alien Romulus. You finish Romulus and you're like, "Fuck yeah, it's amazing, such fun time." And then you think about it, it's like, "Nah, you know what? Maybe it's not." And then you get High Life. It's just like at the end, I was like baffled by it. But then it's been 6 years already, and I've just kept thinking about it. It's lasted. So yeah, those are my picks.
I bet Carson's is Iron Sky.
Not quite. I really like. I have a few honorable mentions. I really like Ad Astra. Alien's obviously very good, but I didn't want to be that basic and pick it. Weirdly, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 probably would be up there.
Wow.
I love that movie. I think it's easily the best MCU film to date. But I decided what's the most basic option I could give that's the most obvious and least inspired. I'm going to go 2001, A Space Odyssey. Apparently the only one here who likes the film. No one else mentioned it. I'm just saying. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much needs to be said about it. It's a pretty good movie, so I would recommend it if you've not seen it yet. Now let's go to our rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't discussed on the podcast? Nick, what have you been watching?
A lot of documentaries. Just it's one of those weird things. I wanted to watch a lot of movies this week, just like complicated, like engaging, whatever. And whenever I started, I was like, I'm just not feeling it. And instead of wasting 2 hours on something I was just not vibing with, I was like, you know what, I'll watch something else. I watched the O.J. Simpson documentary, O.J. Made in America. Spectacular, absolutely spectacular and terrifying just for the state of humanity as a whole. I rewatched Challengers, which was a fun time because why not? Why not rewatch one of the best films of 2024 that we also talked about? Another documentary that I watched is Kim's Video, which is about a defunct video rental in New York and a very weird fan's obsession with trying to bring it back. And it ends up in Italy because that's where the collection ended up, and there's the mafia involved. It's very, I think it's a very good story presented in a very weird way that I don't necessarily think was the right way to go about it. I do wonder, like many others have said, I think even Hillary White of the podcast said, like, why did this guy feel like he had to tell this story? It feels super weird. But anyway, and the other last documentary that I watched was Los Angeles Plays Itself. Not to be confused with the gay porn film. Los Angeles Plays Itself is a almost 3-hour documentary about LA through the lens of cinema. And it uses archival footage of almost every movie set in LA, or movies that are supposedly set in LA that use it as a location but were actually shot elsewhere, to explore the evolution of cinema and of storytelling, but also of the city of Los Angeles itself. And I think you, Carson, would really like it as someone who's very grown accustomed to just the city itself and its landscape. It's from 2003. There is a restored version that's available on YouTube before someone takes it down, because otherwise it's very, very hard to find. Watch it. Very, very good. Even watching it in chunks is doable. And then last three things that I watched very quickly, well, like two. One was a short film, Juliet in Paris, that I recommend. Very creepy and bizarre. I watched Despicable Me 4 because one night with the family we just were looking for something dumb and quick, and I was like, well, we could watch Despicable Me 4, and I enjoyed it, like, for what it is. It's just dumb fun, but fun nonetheless. And lastly, probably my biggest recommendation for like fiction over the past couple of weeks, Debs. DEBS to be precise, because it's an acronym. I don't remember for what. A very surprisingly fun, actually campy action comedy that's all about living in the closet and coming out as lesbian. It's basically, imagine Charlie's Angels if it were a very gay Disney Channel movie. That's the best way I could describe it. Very fun, very silly, very stylish as well, but surprisingly for a 2004 film, it manages to talk about homosexuality in a way that's very respectful, and of the stigma and shame that comes from people finding out your desires, and how that can not ruin your life, but like change everything around you, and ultimately you have to follow your heart and instead of conforming. I was like, man, 2004. What happened? How did this film come about? So that's probably the biggest, like, most interesting recommendation I can give. So watch Debs, and it's 19 minutes. Get out. We love to see it.
Don't worry, I added both the version you're talking about and the gay porn version of the Los Angeles Plays itself to my watch
Hey.
list, so I will get to it. Big Los Angeles fan. If you're a film fan, just in general listening, I'd highly recommend going to LA. Obviously, it's just like there's a lot of museums and stuff, but you'll just be going to get a coffee and you'll walk through a building to get to the coffee shop, and you're like, wait a minute, this is the apartment from Blade Runner. And it's very weird and surreal, just like be in a set all of a sudden, but it happens. It happened to me, so it could happen to you. I've only seen 2 films this week outside of the Alien stuff that I've been rewatching. Again, we're going to be talking about some Universal Monsters, like modern versions of their stories on the podcast soon. So catching up with some that I haven't watched. I watched Young Frankenstein for the first time ever. What a fun film. Y'all, this is really good. This lived up to the hype. I do think once it gets into, because like you have this really inspired start, you have this really inspired end. In the middle, it does have to just start being Frankenstein for a little bit to get to the plot to A to B, and I will say some of that started to feel a little bit not as inspired, but overall still really, really funny. Gene Wilder is incredible in this film as always. And then in the theater, I watched Dee Dee. This is the debut film from Sean Wang, who made a documentary. I forget what it's called, but it was nominated for a documentary short this year at the Oscars, about a young kid, basically semi-autobiographical, growing up in the Bay Area. And he is entering high school and he is living life. And I will say this is one of my favorite films of the year. It's my third 5-star film of the year. I had just about every single emotion you could have watching this film. I laughed, I cried, I cringed, I had a full-blown panic attack. It is just such a rich and smart film as far as the screenplay goes. You could probably genuinely write about 100 essays on this film, and the thematic levels to it. Every line means something and brings a new question of identity and growing up and gender and age, and it talks about the internet, and it talks about social media growing because it takes place in 2008, right on the verge of when social media is becoming a thing. It mentions just consistently, it goes deeper and deeper and just is such a fun time. It's a really, really great film. Compared to something like 8th Grade, where 8th Grade has a similar concept, but left me a little bit cold. I think you can definitely tell the key here is authenticity. This is someone putting their life on screen with every emotional layer and every quirky weirdness and every awkward date that they had, and just everything on screen feels so real. And in that, you get the poignance of real life. The performances are incredible. Specifically, there's so much here about the mom whose husband is off earning the money in Taiwan, so she has to raise his household and carry it by herself, and she has all these kids, and it's just a mess, and she's dealing with her dreams that she once had, that now she doesn't have anymore because she has children and life moves on, and it's just heartbreaking, but at the same time is so wholesome and so heartfelt. I really just cannot recommend this enough. It's behind Challengers and I Saw the TV Glow for me still this year, but this is absolutely one of the best films of the year. And it's a sad thing that all the Oscar pundits who are having 3-hour podcasts discussing films that no one's ever seen before, debating if they're going to get Best Supporting Actor, have just decided to randomly decide to ignore this film and not mention it, because if they, as they claim, craft these narratives and push films towards nominations, you would think, because they're so dedicated to diversity and so dedicated to smaller stories and lifting them up, that they would spend time talking about how films like this and I Saw the TV Glow deserve that attention. But instead, they're just going to debate for 3 hours on if a film releasing in December that no one's ever seen because it's not out yet is going to get Best Actor. So you know what? Good for them. A little bit of shame for me. Jack, what have you seen this week as far as for your rapid releases?
Sorry I had to disappear then. Kevin Feige rang me up and was like, you need to caution yourself about the Marvel thing. So I said, sorry, Kevin. So the check's still coming. Just we need to remember just to calm ourselves down. I did say like I was into like a Star Wars mood, and then I got to Attack of the Clones. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, really. But I thought that usually in August I planned to do an Alfred Hitchcock marathon, just to sort of get the duds out of the way, or just sort of look at his career from the silent film Then I was like, well, with Romulus, and because it's been like since like 6 years since Covenant, I'd really like to do a deep dive and have a look at stuff again. Because my last reviews I did in preparation for Covenant on Letterboxd, I did 9 of the features, which included AVP and a few of the prologues that you'd mentioned earlier about Covenant. I'd watched everything just to really prep myself. So I thought I'd go back and I'd try to watch as much as I could do. And so I watched the first 4. I'll get into. I don't want to get into specifically about all of them, but just 2 or 3 particular. And I watched quite a lot of documentaries. But out of the way, just outside the alien stuff, I watched the new Doug Liman Instigators movie with Casey Affleck and Ben Affleck. I thought it was fine. I thought it was interesting to watch 2 of them essentially play against type. Casey Affleck's a wisecracking arsehole. Matt Damon's the one that's quite stoic. And there's a little bit of depth behind it. It's quite fun. It's constantly well paced. It does go over and over and over the top in type of set pieces. Be interesting to see your 2 opinions of it because it just doesn't know when to stop. But it was very much a palate cleanser, like just a classic 3-star movie. No issue, no foul. Quite good fun. They've got really good chemistry. It's quite well directed. And then after my Alien marathon, I've had, me and my wife paid to watch Dusk, a Twilight parody, which was at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last August, and we like the Twilight series. Partly, I think I love it. I think she's just moderately involved with it at this point, but I find them fascinating to watch. And it was interesting to see because a few years ago in 2018, we went to watch Halloween in Seattle when the David Gordon Green movie came out, and the night before she surprised me and took me to a comedic production of the first Halloween, and the line was huge, and she'd prepaid tickets, but I don't think she paid a lot. She's like, look, if it's rubbish, we'll just leave, it's not a problem. I was like, okay, I want to watch it, and it was one of the most fun, entertaining, comedic experiences I've had, where they just spoke about on stage in like caricatures. Like there was the bogeyman, like it was really good fun, with the masks and stuff, and it sort of caught that hype fever of watching a movie for the back in like watching Romulus or Covenant, like back into a swing of things. It wasn't nearly as good as a Halloween production. It was very fun. They cut out loads of characters. It was an hour and 55 minutes, but it was a musical instead. It wasn't just a comedic, but it was fun. It was £2.83. It was like $3 to rent. Go support local stuff. It was really good. The singing, the enthusiasm on a stage, just like producing something that's comedic. They can't play with, they've got to play around with copyright. It was a fun experience. It wasn't brilliant. I thought it was going to be really well produced, but it was really good fun. And then just one last thing before we get into the alien stuff, and I'll be brief. I watched the Watchmen Chapter 1 DC animated movie. And from being a big fan of the graphic novel, oh god, I almost called it a comic book then. I had to check myself. Not really liking the Damon Lindelof, whatever that was, sequel series, and quite enjoying the Zack Snyder Ultimate Cut of Watchmen. I enjoyed it. Why this is part 1 of 2, I don't know. If anyone's been watching the Justice League stuff, Crisis of Earth, I don't know why I'm doing that, but I watched one of them and I felt I had to watch the other 2. It's better animated than the others. It is dark. It really does go for it. It's not. It doesn't pull punches at all. But I do feel like it's definitely we'll just dip our toes into this. And to be honest, I think if you either fall into that river or attempt to swim or don't bother at all. So back onto the alien thing. So I didn't want to watch just the same shit features of like the theatrical cut, the director's cut. So I found the work print version of Alien, which is 2.5 hours. So it's about almost 40 minutes a lot more of footage, and it's fascinating. There are alternate sequences here, additional sequences are being cut out, more with the monster. There's very much a sexual assault sequence that's implied in the original 1979 film. This one, it's very much hands-on. The alien crawls in on its. It doesn't move like a person hardly. It crawls in on its feet. It's interesting that how they interject Kane into this movie a lot more. There's a sequence at the beginning where he's talking to them all off screen, where it's meant to cut back and forth, but they didn't shoot the other footage, and it's Ridley Scott talking to him, and he's having a cigarette as soon as he comes out and stuff, and he's the first one out. It's just very interesting, and then there's stuff like there is another character on board that ship that nobody knows about who Ripley has sex with, which is a very much established theory that they're all having sex with each other, primarily for the sake of being isolated. Because there's a lot of people who give that Alien 3 stick because she has sex with Charles Dance. She's been in cryo sleep for a long time. It's like a sexual urge, which is very interesting to watch in the original. Like he's just a pilot, but she has sex with him. She asks Lambert in this cut if she's had sex with Ash, because she has feelings that Ash isn't who he says he is very early on. There's a lot more hard cuts to Ash when he's watching Kane. It's very much more on the nose. And then there's other stuff like, obviously, more with the alien itself, very much more of an extended sequence at the finale, where it comes back in and goes back out and stuff. And there's a lot more depth to it, a lot more alternate footage that's from the VHS that's been added on. There's a sequence where Kane has a chest buster. You can hear Ridley Scott give Tom Skerritt screen dynamics. The deleted scenes incorporate it where they find the actual alien nest as well, which is a bit of a goes back to this because there's this interesting bit where Romulus, they find the thing on the wall, which is like weird of how that's happened, and it's bathing itself because we don't get to see that in anything else. How it's like gestating essentially, but the work print's fascinating. On one, it's terrible because it doesn't flow very well. It's fucking humongous. It's silly. It's stupid. The alien like walks in. It's like prancing about in the hallways. But what it teaches people, and I think it's adamant to watch it, is how good the edit is in Alien, and how it's been edited twice. And they change sequences around, but the pacing is still phenomenal on each. And it's the Jaws effect. Less is more, less is more, less is more. And throughout the work print, it's fascinating to know that everything's been shot, and everything's far more additional in scope and scale, and the monster's huge, and etc. And it like talks in a little bit, and it essentially like the killing of Harry Dean Stanton. The alien is up there, wrapped up, and we go past it a few times. Where in the film you can barely see it, where it's actually there and it's swinging, like it's having fun with him. There's a lot of like very strange takes of how the franchise evolved from just essentially what gambles it is. But I'm going to send it to Carson because I would love for your opinion of that. I think it's fascinating to watch the 1979 theatrical and then watch that, because what could have been, it's crazy. It's ultimately like watching, if anyone's seen the deleted scenes of the original Star Wars, where it's like, oh god, it's out for a reason, but it's still fascinating to see a feature that is so seminal and phenomenal and iconic, but what could have been. Really interesting. I watched the 35mm scan of Aliens, the theatrical cut with the backlights on my TV, 65-inch. I love the special edition of that cut in 1990 is better. God, that looks phenomenal on screen. The grain, the soundtrack. God, what an experience! Like, just felt being back there. I watched the assembly cut of Alien 3 because nothing else exists for me. Just watched that on the Blu-ray. Really good. Memories of Alien, if anyone's seeing that, Origins of Alien about like Geiger and stuff. It wasn't very good. It was very much like additional supplement information. But then I watched Resurrection, the theatrical cut, which if you talk about two different versions of a film, Jesus wept, like the theatrical opens up with the clones being crafted, but that then doesn't help the reveal later on in the film. Whereas the reveal in the opening of the special edition, the 1977 cut, it has like the Jurassic World cut where we see a fly, we think it's an alien, and we go back. Really fun, tongue in cheek, just butchered. Very quick now. I watched the Beast making of Alien, really good. I watched the documentary making of Aliens, obviously Romulus. I watched my own. This is going to sound so fucking egotistical. I watched my own fan edit of Alien Covenant because I added a little bit more in, but I'm going to make a fully fleshed out one there because there's bits I've missed in the edit. Really interesting to watch, like how that flows out with all the extra sequences in it, and including like the Last Supper, which I feel like is integral. Again, you talk about Romulus with the editing. Covenant takes out similar sort of stuff about getting to know these people are making a massive leap from the Earth to go live in a colony and leave everybody, and they're all just like couples. It's an interesting thing. I watched that, but I'm gonna watch the 4K of Covenant, which I've got, and I'm gonna watch the work print of Prometheus that I have as well that I'm going to watch. It's just 2.5 hours. It's a lot longer. Just to end, it's the 45th anniversary of Alien this year. 5 years ago, they released, I think it's 6 anniversary shorts. They're all about 10 minutes, and it's just other creatives that you don't really know. There's a few actors you'll notice in other stuff in British television and stuff, but just non-canon, I would believe, differing viewpoints of an alien encounter with the xenomorph. And I've watched about 2 so far because they're on YouTube. One, Containment, which is essentially Romulus, where there's a group of people in a very small pod that's literally about to just get picked up by a big space station, and one of them has got the alien in them, and they all get very paranoid. And at the end, it's very, very clear. She's in her own blood. She's writing "Do not open" on the. It's very, very good stuff. And then I was watching one called Ore, where a woman in an iron worker is working under the, like, essentially again in Romulus, where she's working in horrible situations, and the dog goes missing, and like the aliens killed it and stuff. And there's loads of really good stuff. What I'm going to watch is I'm going to desperately watch the Alien 3 documentary, which is meant to be fascinating. It was called Wreckage and Rape. Then they changed it to Wreckage and Rage, which again is like such a Fincher thing to do. Very, very hardcore, very on the nose. But apparently it's very much like you can see where shit really like broke down between everyone. And that's really it. But I would recommend people watching the Alien stuff. And also for anyone out there for additional material, watch the digital series of Alien Isolation. It's only 70 minutes. It's on IGN on YouTube. It's like a retelling of the video game, not through cutscenes, but them just making a small feature film out of it. I played the game, complete on the hardest difficulty for anyone who's played it. It's nightmarish. Genuinely, it's horrific to play. But this takes a lot from that. And if you're not into the video game universe or sphere, do watch that Isolation, because it's just animation as well. It's quite good fun. But I've really enjoyed this month. I've really enjoyed August so far. Really enjoyed going back to Alien, and I think the added impression of watching so much Alien stuff would have gutted me out of watching Romulus, but I actually think it elevated the material. So I think while I might be sort of downtrodden on it a little bit, I do feel like I'm secretly like quite more enthusiastic about it. But once again, thank you very much for programming this. It's brilliant to watch in the cinema. It's two really good movies we watched by auteurs. So yeah, what a brilliant day. So thank you very much for having me on, Carson, again.
No worries. Well, I hope you're still in the mood to talk about aliens and alien life forms, because next week we will be back. Summer blockbusters, we're wrapping up soon. Our second to last episode is on James Cameron's Avatar and Avatar: The Way of Water, both of them. So we're going to have a lot of fun in that conversation. Nick, sadly, you won't be joining us, but that's okay. Let's see where we can find everyone on social media. Nick, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NickyGra97, where I'll be putting up updates. I won't be here because I will be in Berlin, officially starting production on Never My Love, which is very exciting. For anyone who's interested in the project, you can go on my profiles and find the link to the Indiegogo campaign, which is still open. It will be open. We're going to extend it a little bit because once people see behind the scenes of this production, they're going to be like, this looks cool. I want to see it in advance. And so they can support the making of a very, very fun queer horror romance.
Jack, where can we find you?
You can find me on Letterboxd and Twitter or X with the username at Jak-Luke Sharp. On Clapper, you can find me dropping my Alien Romulus review probably tonight or tomorrow. It's definitely, I'm going to try and make it a lot more positive having this conversation. I hope we weren't too negative, but I do feel that I think all three of us expected it to be a different embodiment of the franchise, but a welcome one anyway. But you can find me on there, and yeah, just on Letterboxd, where you can find all my ramblings about 9 different cuts of Alien, 16 different documentaries. It's going to be a pretty much stacked August for me on Letterboxd. So yeah, give it a gander if you can do.
I like that you set out to do your Star Wars series just specifically to watch the TV shows and then quit before you watch the TV shows. That's pretty iconic. And the new trilogy you didn't get to either.
People would probably say that's the better decision when they're somewhere. And I would probably tend to agree with them.
You can find me on Twitter at BP_movie reviews, Letterboxd, just Carson Timar. Thank you so much for listening. And like I said, we'll be back next week to discuss all things Avatar. See you guys then. Goodbye.